The Oakland A's are going to move, we think, to Las Vegas. They'll be the first team in the modern era to play baseball in four different cities. We're going to talk with a big A's fan, as somebody who has written about the A's, and he also is going to talk to us about their move to Sacramento. Well, Gordon and I talk a lot on this podcast about trying to get the perspective of fans. Because we don't live in a particular city, we don't know what the fan base is actually feeling. So we're lucky to have on our podcast today Vince Wetzel join us, and he is both an A's fan and an author. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see in the background he's got his new book, Lose Yourself, which we'll talk about. But more than anything, Gordon and I want to welcome to the podcast. We want to talk A's baseball with Vince. Vince, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Mark and Gordon. I appreciate you having me on.
And we were talking. Go ahead, Gordon.
Oh no, I was gonna say we are excited to have you on here, especially given that this year's A's season starting off is a lot more exciting to talk about than last year's A's season, and something we even kind of spoke on that. In some essence, that despite all the uncertainty around the team this year, that for the team, they're in a no pressure situation that these guys can just go out there, and they've actually gotten off to a much better start than I think most people anticipated this year.
Man, it's the 2020 version of Major League, right?
I mean, I think it would be a struggle for most non-A's fans out there if you were like, name 5 A's players just off the top of their head. I really wonder how many different baseball fans could do that.
I mean, I'm struggling too myself. I'm just going, oh, well, no, that person left. Okay. It is a different squad, and I was watching a little bit of the game yesterday, and just it was not a good game to watch. The night before is the one I should have been watching, but I was doing something else. But it is very interesting just how the team has no expectations, and sometimes when you have no expectations, you're free to play the way you want.
Well, they have two players I can really highlight, and I think we'd all probably pick the same people. I just saw today that Shohei Ohtani of the Dodgers was named Player of the Week, and he had 7 homers and a bunch of RBIs, and he's leading the league. And Brent Rooker actually had 7 homers, the same amount of RBIs, and had a higher ops plus or a higher ops than Shohei for the week, but he did not win Player of the Week. Mr. Ohtani won. So this Brent Rooker is a really, really good baseball player on a not so good team.
I mean, how many players hit 2 home runs in the same inning? I mean,
not very many.
Not very many.
There's not a lot of guys. That's a very exclusive list.
and the other is the closer who we saw pitch against the Yankees in New York recently, when the Mets have not seen him yet, as we're Met fans. And this guy is just lights out right now, Mason Miller.
Yeah, Mason Miller's. I mean, he's. I think I saw a graph is like the closer is the best player on the team. I mean, how many times can you say that if you're not Mariano Rivera or some of these others that have come through? I mean, that's for the A's. It's really kind of fun. If you look back at some of the previous closers, especially during the heyday of the 2000s, when you had oh man. Well, back in the Isringhausen was a good closer, and then you had I can't remember it, but the Rage guy from mid 2000s. So a lot of great closers that would come in. Cardiac Koch, Billy Koch, way back when he would he would like load the bases and then strike the next 3 batters out. I mean, that's just that would be the one.
I think we had a brief experience with him in New York as well. I think he came by and pitched a few seasons here.
Yeah, exactly. So closer is it seems like an A's staple.
Yeah, think of Eckersley, right? The first guy.
Yeah, of course, the first guy, the main one, of course.
So there is a tradition of that, and so as an A's fan, what is it like watching your team go through this? And also, it's a 2-part question. And we mentioned that the multiple teams that cities that the A's have played in. Do A's fans have any connection to the Kansas City A's or the Philadelphia A's that came before them? Because we Met fans have only had one team. It's been in New York.
Yeah.
We never went anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, they've been, in Oakland since 68, right?
Right.
So there's not many Kansas City fans. They'll bring out some of the KC players every once in a while, and they'll talk, oh yeah, Connie Mack, black and white, suit and tie, fedora hat, or straw hat, managing from the dugout. But it's mostly the A's start and end with Catfish and Reggie, Salbando, all those guys, and then going through the 80s, mid 80s, or late 80s, early 90s squads, and then of course the big three and Jason Giambi, Tejada years, the Moneyball years, I should say. Although the movie never points out the impact of the big three of Mulder, Hudson, and Zito.
That's what I thought you were talking about, actually, when you said.
Exactly. So that's always the fun part. And then you had those years with Frank Thomas ending up his career those days as well.
And I always thought it was interesting with that movie because that new movie made me question my own recollection of baseball history. Because I'm like, well, were they not on that 2017? Because those three pitchers were such a big part of why those teams, because they had these three dominant starting pitchers. Hudson, I think, ended up being the overall best of the bunch, but Zito had a fine career, and Mulder I think he was just always a little too injured to really ever fully realize what he could have been.
Yeah. I think that squad, the 20 win squad, I think that was right when they hit everybody was playing, pitching their lights out. I think the year before the Jeremy Slide year, the baseball flip from Jeter, that was Zito's best year. But all three were hitting their stride during that 20 game win streak year. So yeah, I guess kind of going back, it's to think about it now, it's been a while since they've been anywhere good. And so kind of thinking about it now, it's like, oh, this is a pleasant surprise. I'm in Sacramento, so you also have the Kings are finally good again. So you're just kind of thinking, wow, this is those doldrums. I'm used to those doldrums with the Kings and with the A's. So to have them semi, respectable at 500 again is like, oh, I guess I'm gonna be watching a little bit more baseball on TV now.
We know that and I've said this on this podcast a few times, I still have my doubts that the A's move to Las Vegas is actually going to happen. And I very much could be wrong about that, but the fact that it isn't coming together just causes me to scratch my head. But this interim move to Sacramento, a place with which you're very familiar and understanding of, maybe you could explain for our audience, right? So Sacramento and Oakland are far apart, but not really that far apart. They're a lot closer than people think, even though one is inland and one is on the coast.
Yeah, so it's to get to, for perspective, I live basically in the same town, West Sacramento, which is where the River Cats, which is a AAA minor league team, used to be the A's, and now it's the Giants, the AAA team. From my house to the Coliseum is probably, on a good no traffic day, it's about a little over about an hour and a half, I should say, from door to door, hour and a half. You can actually even take the train, the Amtrak from Sacramento Station, and it drops you off at the Coliseum Station. That takes about 2.5 hours there. You actually, and then if you take BART, you can in the Bay Area, you cross over the bridge, cross over Amtrak, and you head right into the stadium. So it's about an hour and a half. Just right down 80. You take it's one freeway. So you get on 80, you go for an hour and a half, and then all of a sudden there's the Coliseum exit. And that's where, you go, well, there's the Coliseum where the Raiders played. That's where the Warriors played. And now the A's.
And because that trip, it's first you get to Oakland before you go over more bridges and get into San Francisco itself. So by default are more Sacramento people A's fans because of proximity and history than they might be Giants fans?
I would say probably more Giants. The Giants have marketed themselves better over the last 20 years to Northern California. So I would say there's a lot more Giants fans in Northern California, but there's a lot of A's fans, of course, a lot of transplants that come through. And obviously with the proximity to the California capital, you also have Dodger fans, you have Padre fans, you have, well, I don't know how many Angel fans there are in life,
Period.
but but you have them as well. But I would say that in Sacramento, you probably have Giant fans, A's fans, and then Dodger fans.
Imagine it's probably a little bit difficult to find. Dodger fans are going to be to escape them in California. I'm pretty sure you're going to find Dodger fans just about everywhere.
Yes.
With the move to Oakland, I mean, I know players are already talking about it. I think it's been interesting because everybody was sort of clowning on the move at first, but it seems like the players like are a little bit more open to it. Like I know Justin Turner and Cody Bellinger both actually spoke about going to Sutter Health Park and how they were like they seemed to be a little bit more on board with it than I think people would have expected.
Yeah, I think the oddest thing about that park that are going to throw major leaguers is that the clubhouses are in the outfield. So you can't really kind of escape or look at film very well in the dugout. So you can't go back and kind of you'll have to have your iPads ready, loaded with all the pitchers to do their scouting between at bats. Because there's no video room that's close to the dugout. So the clubhouse is in the outfield. So if you're done for the day, you can't just go back and shower unless you want everybody to see that you're leaving the dugout to go take your shower before the game is over. So that's going to be a little bit different for folks. But the park itself was designed to be expanded into a major league park if needed. So it has like the infrastructure to withstand a second deck if something falls through with Vegas and the A's decided to stay in Northern California. The park could be retrofitted to fit into that park itself.
Capacity at Sutter Health Park is 14,014, which I really like that. Fixed, including fixed seats and lawn seating and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny because when that park was first built, I mean, I remember going out there. There are trees in the outfield lawn seating, and it's taken this long for those trees to mature. So it's beautiful out there now. But if they put like outdoor seating, like stands and stuff, they're gonna have to cut those trees down. It'll be a shame, but it'll be worth it to add more seats into that stadium.
I think it's interesting because I know personally I did not consider the idea that the Sacramento would retrofit the stadium, and let's say that they sold out every game or in a dream world, and all of a sudden there's enough impetus in Sacramento to have the team stay there. That they actually might do that. I guess I hadn't really thought that as a fan, and nobody's really talking about that because they're ordained to go to Las Vegas at this point.
Right, exactly. I think I'm projecting that if like something does fall through in Vegas, and I think that's what the owners of the Kings who own the River Cats in Sacramento and West Sacramento, the region's hoping like if Vegas falls through, and you have to go somewhere. We're here. We can retrofit the ballpark. You don't have to really. All the infrastructure is already here. If you want to stay, just saying. I think that's their position right now.
And certainly the fact that, because I knew that, like, looking into it, the fact that the stadium was built with the idea that it could be retrofitted and upgraded to support a bigger team, I think that makes the move. I think that's a piece of information that probably isn't getting spread around enough, because I think there's a lot of people that just kind of hear about the situation in their mind. It's like, oh, ha ha ha, Oakland is gonna go play in a AAA stadium. Isn't that funny? Like, they don't really understand. It's like it's not quite the same. Like, they're obviously going to be, a little bit further along. And I do think it's going to be interesting to see how major league teams adjust to the fact that they don't have the easy access to the clubhouse right from the dugout. I think that could be a very interesting change. And I'd be really curious to see what kind of impact that has on teams playing in Sacramento going forward.
Most definitely. And then for the fan experience, parking is always going to be an issue. It's a downtown Sacramento ballpark for all intents and purposes. So you have a little bit of limited parking. If you go across the river into downtown Sacramento, there's plenty of parking because that's where the Kings play. And it's about like I'd say 3 blocks between where the Sacramento Kings play and where the River Cats play. And there's some parking garages there, but it's the actual on-site parking is a little bit more limited than maybe in other parks as well. So that might be a little more difficult to figure out, but if we'll see. I mean, that's what the next 3 years will look like.
And most of the major league teams are charter flying or are doing their own flights. So for anybody that's provincially thinking, is the Sacramento airport big enough to? Yeah, it's plenty big enough to handle all the major league teams going straight there. They don't have to drive an hour and a half from Oakland.
No, it's a half hour, probably a half hour charter bus ride from the airport. The airport is one of the best to get in and out of. If you guys are going, you want to take the Mets game in Sacramento, you'll find flying into that airport is a dream. It has all the major carriers, and you just kind of fly in. People can get in and out of there really easily and quickly. So that part is very nice.
Interesting. I noticed in your background that you were a sports writer, as obviously you wrote this book, which is about baseball and more than that, and also a Dodger intern. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, well, I was your typical '90s college kid. I thought going into school, I wanted to be on ESPN. I wanted to be on Sports Center. I wanted to be Dan Patrick. I wanted to be Keith Olbermann. So I went, okay, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to take journalism. I'm going to take broadcasting. I'm going to get a job out of college, and I'm going to make my way over to Bristol and do the Sports Center thing. But out of college, I realized that sending out tapes, because back then you sent tapes, you didn't just create a YouTube channel with all your highlights. Those tapes were $5 to send a piece. Clips were 35 cents, so you could kind of figure out the direction I went. But before then, I was able to land an internship with the Dodgers in '95. So that was Hideo Nomo's rookie year, and I think the 4th of 5.
Dodger rookies of the year.
Yeah, rookies of the year, right? So in that clubhouse, you had Eric Karros, Mike Piazza, Raul Mondesi, Hideo Nomo. Hollinsworth was here and there. And in fact, one of my first days, I actually opened up a random cabinet to get media guides, and there was Raul Mondesi's Rookie of the Year award just sitting there. Of course, I picked it up. I looked at it and went, wow, this is the only time I'm ever going to hold a Rookie of the Year award in my hand. So that was a lot of fun. It was a good time. It was a great season. The O'Malleys still owned the club, so you still had some of those personal family business type touches that they had. They had like the company picnic at the end of the year. They brought in and out for us on the West Coast. In-N-Out Burger, which is a staple. They brought in a In-N-Out food truck, so that was fun. When we were in first place and you gained a game on first place, you got ice cream. So if we were in first place, you could come by and get ice cream at 3 o'clock every day. It was great.
I think they probably do, they're owned by Guggenheim Partners now. So chances are they might do a little more than that in LA for the Dodgers these days.
Exactly. But I would bring notes to Peter O'Malley himself. I would have a stack of clips, and the intern would, walk into the office and say, "Mr. O'Malley, here are your clips. Here's your media notes for the day." So that was, and of course I got cursed out by Tommy Lasorda. And you haven't lived unless you've been cursed out by Tommy Lasorda.
I mean, that's really how you know you've made it in baseball, right?
Right, exactly. I think the copier broke down, and so I did not have the stats into his hands soon enough, and so he let me know his displeasure with the broken down copy machine.
No doubt in colorful language with which he was known for.
Oh, definitely. You, as I said, you haven't lived unless you've been dressed down by Tommy Lasorda.
So, but you are and have been an A's fan before and after that, right? It's always been the A's.
No, actually, it's mostly been the Dodgers. But then my wife is from the East Bay, and so when I moved up, she was my girlfriend and then my fiance. So when I moved up and I got a job with Oakland Tribune, we lived 20 minutes from the Oakland Coliseum. So so they became my AL team, so because, as a Dodger fan, I could never, ever root for the Giants. Like that, there's still something that just turns in my stomach, even mentioning their name. But it was, we would go to dollar Wednesdays, 20, 30 games a year, especially starting out. We don't have much money, so date night was, go to the game, park in the parking lot, walk across the bridge, get 2 tickets, get a couple dogs, and we had date night for $5. That's how we spent our Wednesdays sometimes.
Can't even buy the hot dogs for $5 now.
No, you can't. No. I know it dates me. So
you let's talk about your book, because I think that's a good segue, because I was going to ask you about the Oakland Coliseum itself, and it's obviously been there a very long time. You wrote before we had this podcast, and we wanted to talk about the quest of Brett Austin for the 400 batting average, but the Oakland Coliseum itself, was it ever a great ballpark? If you go all the way back to the beginning, or because all we see now is empty seats and a park that's in disrepair.
Yeah, remember in the 80s, late 80s, before Mount Davis, before that monstrosity that Al Davis built in that outfield. If you recall, it had like these beautiful bleachers with ivy, and ice plant, in the outfield, and you could see the Oakland Hills in the background. It was a beautiful park, and it was well maintained. When the Haas family had it, it was a great park. And of course, during the 80s, I mean, they were one of the biggest draws in baseball. You had McGuire and Canseco and Stewart. So you had a lot of great fans coming to the games and really living and dying by the wins and loss of the A's. Obviously, when Haas sold it, then like the Wolves had it, and then Mr. Fisher had it. Obviously, the perspective of the team changed, but I think even in the 2000s, when the majority of the time when I went there, you would have those drummers in the background in the bleachers. You'd have these horns that would just continue to blow. The vuvuzelas, of soccer fame, they would just be brought out, and you would just hear it over and over again. And then, when they were really hopping and when that stadium was packed, it really had a different feel than a lot of other baseball parks, partly because it's one of the last parks where you can tailgate before the game. And so you would have people who would have already had their brats and they'd have their pops and they'd come into the game already ready to go. It almost felt like a college football atmosphere when the team was good and when the stands were filled with folks. So it's a different experience when they're there and they're good and it's packed.
You actually can tailgate. I've been to Citi Field a few times this year, and I'm impressed with the amount of people out there barbecuing and doing stuff. And as you say, you wouldn't think of it in New York, but I'm pretty sure in Vegas they wouldn't have a whole lot of tailgating before the baseball games.
No, no. It's part of the they'll be tailgating at Caesar's Palace or whatever,
Right.
walking
Right.
over.
I mean, that does sound like a very fun tailgate. I'm not gonna lie. I think it just might be a little bit too hot to be outside there.
No
Right,
doubt.
exactly.
No doubt. So the book Lose Yourself, and we want to talk a little bit about what made you sort of build a story around somebody who was trying to bat 400 for the season. And I also want you to fill in last year when Luis Arias was giving it a run and you were writing this book. Were you rooting for him not to make it?
Well, I think I first wrote the first draft in 2021, so towards the end of the pandemic. So yeah, there were some points where I was just going, does he really have a shot? And then but I kind of think that you almost have to be so far ahead of 400, then kind of almost kind of ease back into it and hope that you make it the whole season in 400. I would think it's almost impossible for you to like creep up on 400 and get to 400 at the end of the season. So I kept on looking at it and going, yeah, he's unless he's over, and if he finds himself over it, then I'll start to pay attention. But if he's close, he's not gonna reach it. He's not gonna get there.
Just from the volume of at bats, if you're hitting like 380 in late July, it's unlikely you're gonna hit like the 500 or something. You're gonna need to hit the rest of the way to get your average up those 20 points to finish out the season.
And then just the media bombardment, just the amount of pressure that comes in, and that's part of what intrigued me about the story is just the amount of pressure that kind of comes down on a player, and not only just like the at bats, but just like the obligations that they have to do and see before a game, during and after the game, all the different pieces of it. How do they manage that and manage those expectations going into every game towards the end?
And you cover that in the book, I think with the different characters that appear. And so you've got Brett Austin, the guy who's trying to hit 400, and without giving anything away, he decides to play the final game of the season when he actually has a 400 average. And Ted Williams may be echoing in the back of his mind, the fictional character, because Ted Williams went 6 for 8 in a doubleheader on the last day of the season to bat 406 in 1941. Brett Austin has all the demons, as you write, of like, oh, am I making the right decision by playing today? So that's an interesting story. And every character in the book, you have your sports reporter Dana Peck, who's got her own situation and catharsis she has to go through what's going on personally. So each of the stories are really very interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to go ahead.
I think that's what's something for people that that haven't read the book. I think that's something that sets this book apart from a lot of like other sports books out there, is that it's not just a story about Brett and what's going on the field. You have other characters in there like Fred, who works at the Oakland Coliseum. You have characters like Will, who's just a fan of Brett. And I think that's something that's really important, kind of sets it apart and makes it different, because you get the perspective of not just the player, but also the fans that watch him. And that's ultimately all we are, is we're just fans watching these guys. So I think that's a really cool aspect of the book.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued by, we go to a game, right? You sit down, you're there with 40,000 other people. And I know what's going on in my life. I've got my own issues going on. But, what about you look over to your left or your right, and you look down a few rows, you don't know these people, but yet you have this communal experience that everybody has experienced together. And you all are kind of feeling similar emotions, but you're bringing different aspects to that experience that is only unique to you. But you have this, at the same time, you have this big overarching communal experience that is the lens with which you are experiencing it.
And you have everybody invested, as you say, in the same way, going to the last game of the season. Where is he going to do it? Is he not going to do it? And that tension is well displayed in the book. And you even take us through inning by inning in the book. You can kind of look at what's going on in the game and what people are feeling or what they're experiencing. And it is done from the individual perspectives of the characters in the book.
Yeah, that was like a really intriguing part of it. I actually, before I wrote any of the story, I actually filled out the box score. That was the first thing I did before I even wrote the story. I wanted to actually just kind of fill out the box score. What is the game going to look like? And then I went through each character and just took them through that game. And wrote each story individually. And then after I finished all 6, then I smushed them together and looked at, okay, now let's see how we can interact these folks, interweave their stories together. And you get interactions between multiple characters of different storylines happening at the same time. And in fact, one of the stories didn't even come out until I smushed it together and went, oh wait, I didn't know this other story in the background was happening while these other 6 primary stories are working together. So it was a lot of fun just experiencing the different perspectives of that game, and then interweaving them later on.
And you did that from the fans' perspective to think, because all these people that are around besides Brett and the reporter are they're involved, but they're fans, right? You have the usher, and I really like the usher. Like, I think picturing the guy driving every day from Sacramento out to Oakland to the ballpark. I could really feel, that this was the experience of having done that for 20 years, for thousands.
Yeah.
For 1,000 games in Fred. And so that was a kind of a nice, imagery to think of what it was like. And this was the last game of his career as an usher. So everybody's little individual story was them as a fan, because they were going to see this amazing experience in this particular game.
Yeah, definitely. And then, you have Derek, the lemonade guy who's watching the game, but he's got other interests.
Yes.
he's got his own thoughts about what he wants to happen in this game. And then, of course, I also wanted to have one story that did not take place in the ballpark, but something that would be somebody watching it. So the story of Lizzie and her family situation and her father who's dying. Just wanted to kind of share. Baseball reaches so many different people in so many different ways and so many different experiences.
Right. And you even were able to wrap that into the game, though, because one of the people in the family ends up on the field at some point in the game. And that's all we'll say about that. Don't spoil anything for everybody, because you really should buy the book, and talk about the title a little bit, because I think people might be familiar with the title, but they may not know how it's related.
Yeah. So Lose Yourself is obviously a reference to basically Brett Austin's walk-up song. So if the Eminem song is there. And as I was searching for titles for this book, I thought, okay, it should be something that has different meaning. So there is the Lose Yourself of the Eminem song, talking about being in the moment. But then there's also the opposite end of it. There's the losing yourself in just these expectations that you set upon yourself. You can kind of get lost in just trying to live up to these expectations instead of just living in that moment and being a part of what that accomplishment that you're trying to achieve. So I think there's all these multiple pieces, and the cover has the disintegrating baseball, because you can just lose yourself if you don't let yourself live in that moment.
No, I think it also works well, just sort of the communal aspect of going to the game, and in some respects, all of the stuff that comes before the game and after the game. When you go up to the ballpark, you do gotta kind of just lose yourself in the aspect of being there the ballpark for the day to get there and enjoy baseball. And that's what's kind of great about going to the game like that.
Exactly. It's the fun part of baseball is the communal piece. It's the game that you can talk to a neighbor, and you can get heckled, and you can get a lemonade, or walk around the ballpark with this girl that you like.
And it's not, while the quest for 400 is a personal thing and the fans are all vested in, the success of that or failure is not as important to the story as you might think it is, right? This is all the other aspects of it going on simultaneously that makes this experience and this moment, as you say, bigger than that.
Yeah, I think another piece that I really liked about the 400 part of it is that 398 is a heck of a season. It's the best season in the last. It is the best season since 41, right? Even at 398. But that number 400 means something just that little bit more. And if he had 398, everybody would go, yeah, but he didn't hit 400. But 398 is pretty darn good.
It's the same way. It's the same way if you finish your career at 599 home runs. It's not quite as good as hitting 600.
Right, exactly. But it's just a number, but it's not. That dichotomy was something I really wanted to explore.
Do you think we talked about Arias? Do you think it's impossible for a player to do it, or do you think that in an outlier season it's possible?
I think it can be done. That's part of the reason why I did it, because I wrote about it. It was either that or 56. Can somebody sustain a hitting streak longer than 56 games, or can they hit 400? It's possible, but everything has to go just right. I mean, and as I said before, you almost have to get really ahead of the game and hope that you just keep it long enough to stay 400. Right. You have to get that initial inertia and then just hope that you can hold on to it for the rest of the year.
And could you imagine somebody batting, hitting 417 going into September 15th, going, man, I could probably hit 280 the rest of the way. I still might make it.
Right, exactly. And then you start getting in your own head again, because then you're going, okay, I need 2 hits today. I just need 2 hits every day. Or if I can just do this or that, and then all of a sudden you get back into your head. That's part of the reason Brett says, see ball, hit ball. That's my strategy. You kind of keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. Just do what you've been able to do the whole year long. I think that's the only way you can do it. You let yourself kind of get wrapped up. If you lose yourself in this in the moment, or in this whole season and the ramifications of the season, then you're not going to get it done.
It was the memorable line of Yogi Berra, who said you can't think and hit at the same time.
Exactly.
So Vince, tell everybody where we can buy this book, and I'm sure that there are a lot of places.
Yeah, definitely. So it is on wherever you buy your online, make your online purchases. So if it is the river in South America, the Amazon folks, you can do that. If you don't like Amazon, but you want to support your local independent bookstores, there's a place called bookshop.org where the proceeds go to support independent bookstores. So if you like to do that, you can do that. It's also at target.com and barnesandnoble.com. So it's distributed wherever you can, or you can even, go to your independent bookstore and say, hey, do you have this? And they'll order it for you. So that's all available to you. But yeah, it's wherever you think you buy your books.
Well, the title of the book is Lose Yourself. Vince Wetzel is the author. He's also a big A's fan, and thanks so much for coming on to our podcast today and talking about what it's like to be an A's fan through this, and also about a book that Gordon and I very much enjoyed.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.